As Donald Trump tangles with election meddlers Alvin Bragg and Fanni Willis in the very same day. There's a case in Manhattan set for the Alvin Bragg case, a trial set now for March 25th. That happened today. That's, if you can believe it, the single most ridiculous case against Trump. And there's a lot of ridiculous cases. And then, meanwhile, Fanni Willis is right now fighting to keep her job as we speak. She's on the witness stand at this very hour, insisting that she's not corrupt and that she hasn't been stealing money from the taxpayers and paying her lover and all sorts of things. So we'll keep an eye on that. Additionally, yesterday, Jack Smith, the election meddler bought and paid for by the Biden administration, begged the Supreme Court to get the Trump trial started already. They're trying to go after him. They say that Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election. That's the Jack Smith case. And meanwhile, Donald Trump is saying, look, I've got executive immunity here. I was president of the United States during all of the very legitimate actions in question. I'm entitled to immunity related to that job. Jack Smith says, no, the court is currently trying to handle this. And Jack Smith says, hurry it up already. But he won't tell anybody why he wants to hurry. Will he? Let's bring in Will Scharf now, a former federal prosecutor, attorney for President Trump, and a candidate for attorney general in Missouri. Sir, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, as always.
It's amazing. So this Jack Smith filing yesterday where he's begging the Supreme Court to hurry up and resolve all of these immunity questions already. I noticed that there is no explanation as to why they need to hurry.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, I think you need to remember back in December, Jack Smith's team begged the Supreme Court to take this case immediately, that this was a really important issue, presidential immunity, that the Supreme Court have to take it. Now Smith's team is saying the Supreme Court shouldn't take it. They should kick things back to the district court and allow trial to proceed. The only way those two contrary positions make sense is if Jack Smith's only goal is getting this case on trial before the 2024 election. Prosecutions are never supposed to be based on a political timeline. They're never supposed to be brought to influence an election. And Jack Smith's team are now basically admitting that the whole purpose of their prosecution, the public interest in their prosecution, is interfering in the 2024 election. And that should outrage every single American of all political stripes.
Let me read the language from Jack Smith yesterday, and to give everybody a sense of how ludicrous their position is. They say this: delay in the resolution of these charges threatens to frustrate the public interest in a speedy and fair verdict, a compelling interest in every criminal case, and one that has unique national importance here, as it involves federal criminal charges against a former president for alleged criminal efforts to overturn the results of the presidential election, including through the use of official power. But what he's referring to here, Will Scharf, is events surrounding the 2020 election. He doesn't for a moment say that, oh, we've got to hurry to do this before the 2024 election, but his goal is so clear. He clearly wants to meddle in this one.
Yeah, look, when they brought this indictment last summer, Jack Smith and his team were pushing for a trial date in January, 6 months post-indictment. You know, I had simple gun and drug cases that dragged through the courts for years where you had serious legal issues that had to be addressed. The idea that this immensely complex case with hundreds of potential witnesses, with millions and millions of pages of discovery, would be brought to trial in 6 months is just insane. And the only rationale for it, the only logical reason why Smith would be pushing for that is if he wants to meddle in the 2024 election, if the timeline here is political, not legal. And that's just outrageous. So that's why we're asking the Supreme Court to step in here. That's why we're asking the Supreme Court to continue our stay of district court proceedings while we litigate fully this presidential immunity issue. And I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court sees through it and does the right thing.
How likely is it that you'll get an answer of some kind in the weeks and months ahead? What do you expect will happen next here?
I don't want to make any predictions. I think the Supreme Court on this stay application will be inclined to move pretty quickly. That could mean, next week or the week after, or it could mean, further down the road. It really, there's a lot of contingency involved here. But the fact that Jack Smith filed, 2 days when the court gave him a week, and the fact that back in December he tried to short-circuit the entire appellate process, I mean, it really speaks to the urgency that they feel. because I believe that if we get this stay, it's going to be very difficult for them to bring this case to trial before the election, and that's why his team is just totally freaking out.
Yeah, we've seen some reports, meanwhile, that the White House is frustrated that Merrick Garland and the United States Department of Justice haven't more rapidly secured a conviction of Donald Trump. How much should that play a role in this conversation? That it seems that they're being pretty brazen about how much they want to meddle in the election using the Justice Department.
Yeah, look, when Joe Biden came into office, he said we need to depoliticize the Justice Department, and he thumped his chest and said that this was a top priority for him. And instead, they've gone in absolutely the opposite direction. Maybe the reason they haven't secured a conviction against President Trump is that President Trump didn't break any laws, that he didn't do anything criminal. And that's why it took them years to string together an absurd case, relying on absurd interpretations of these incredibly broad federal statutes. And that's why I believe they're ultimately going to lose. But in the meantime, the fact that the President of the United States is publicly pressuring his Justice Department to bring to trial his principal political opponent, I mean, it's just so outrageous and so brazen. It's just a total perversion of our system of justice.
Yes, and the actual threat to our constitutional republic, not Donald Trump. It's clearly coming from Joe Biden and company. If I know, I'm not sure if you're working on these other cases as well, but man, you have to be fascinated by what's happening down in Georgia today. As Fanni Willis is on the stand as we speak, trying to hold on to this case that she's brought against Trump, claiming that he tried to subvert the election, that he's guilty of RICO violations. But it turns out she stands accused pretty credibly of being a corrupt official who hired her lover, is paying him out, and taking a lot of benefits from taxpayer money.
Yeah, I mean, forget keeping her job. Fanni Willis is trying to stay out of prison at this point. You know, as you said before, I'm a former federal prosecutor. Listening to her testimony, I'm just ticking off federal statutes that I think I could indict her under. Honest services fraud, federal bribery, wire fraud. I mean, what they did here is just absolutely outrageous. I'm hopeful that the judge down there, McAfee, disposes of this case, kicks Fanni Willis off of it, tosses the entire indictment. One point I think it's really important to note, though, is that when Fanni Willis trotted out this RICO indictment in the first place, the press, the mainstream media, treated her like she was Elliot Ness, like she was the greatest lawman in the history of the republic, and that she was going to bring these people to justice. The whole thing was a total perversion of our legal system from the start. This indictment should have never been brought, and I hope that the people who were responsible for it are held accountable to the fullest extent of the law.
So if all of the top officials, and it's her and Nathan Wade is her lover, and he's the top official on her team, if all of the top people on this case are corrupted by their own behavior and are taken off this case, what does that mean for the charges against Donald Trump?
So first of all, Fanni Willis and Nathan Wade, I believe, are both now fact witnesses in this case, which means they have an irretrievable conflict of interest, and they both need to be disqualified. More than that, though, the prosecutorial misconduct at issue here is so severe, and the corruption of this process has been so extreme that I think it warrants dismissal of the entire case. I know that's an argument that Steve Sadow, President Trump's lawyer in Georgia, I believe it's an argument that he'll make based on the testimony today. And I hope that the judge does what's right here. I mean, you can't have this sort of thing happening in American courts. Yeah. Fanni Willis hired her secret lover, paid him $1 million taxpayer dollars, took benefits on the back end, has lied throughout this process, committed perjury any number of times. This whole case just needs to be thrown out for the good of the rule of law.
And Will Scharf, I'm listening to her on the stand today. We've been playing some of it live here on the program. And she keeps explaining that, no, I wasn't taking any money from him. In fact, I was paying my end of the bargain. And they would ask her, how are you paying for it? She said cash. And they said, okay, well, do we have ATM receipts from when you took the cash out? No, there's no paper trail. Cash is fungible, she says. So this is her. It's a weird way to say that she's doing everything on the up and up. See, I'm paying on my side of this, but she's kept no paper trail, which is deeply suspicious if she was trying to, maintain her integrity.
She said she regularly keeps $15,000 in cash just lying around her home. Yeah. I mean, it's her testimony has been so weird. I can't imagine any fact finder, judge or jury would find her credible. And again, it speaks to potential excuse me, federal wire or bank fraud, certainly honest services fraud. I mean, she faces very real criminal liability here. Several weeks ago, President Trump said that he thinks she's more likely to face real criminal liability than him or any of the defendants. I think today's testimony bears that out.
Lastly, the other case today was Manhattan. We were kind of expecting that Donald Trump might actually be in Georgia today, and I was telling people earlier this week that all the reports indicated he would be, but unfortunately, he got tied up in Manhattan today with this Alvin Bragg case, accusing him of committing some sort of campaign finance violation for a non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels dating back to before 2016. Somehow he's able to prosecute federal crimes or something. The whole thing is ridiculous. What can you tell us about this case? They say it's starting March 25th, but from the very beginning, this is the one that legal experts have been panning as the weakest possible case.
It's incredibly weak, and it's weak because the Biden Department of Justice passed on prosecuting exactly the same charge. They looked at this thoroughly years ago and decided that there was nothing there, and then Alvin Bragg comes along. He's got a guy in his office, Colangelo, who used to be in the Biden White House counsel's office, and they strung together this weird legal theory that doesn't make any sense. It's never been tried before. It's never been sort of validated by the New York courts, and they're going to try to put President Trump on trial this March. It's just crazy. Todd Blanche, President Trump's attorney up there, made the very good point in court today that in terms of jury selection, President Trump has had these civil cases, the E. Jean Carroll case, the business case brought by Letitia James. There's been wall-to-wall media coverage for months. To me, that indicates that to get a good jury pool, to get fair and unbiased jurors, of course you would push this trial off and wait for a time when that media coverage dies down. But instead, this local judge seems hell-bent on bringing the case to trial as quickly as possible. I think it's a violation of President Trump's rights, and I'm hopeful that something's done about it.
Yeah, rampant election meddling going on across the country. Yeah. The left using the justice system to subvert our very country. Hey, thank you very much, Will Scharf, as always, for your assessment of all of this. Really appreciate your time today.